we don't listen the way we used to. Music is everywhere, always on, always accessible. Our digital profiles are algorithmically optimized to feed us exactly the subgenre of music that we are attracted to. There was a time when listening to music could only be accomplished through an intentional act, either by going to a concert, by choosing a record or a cassette to put on, or by playing the music ourselves. But nowadays, we hear Beethoven in between notifications, Bach in the background at a cafe, or remixed lo-fi Mozart on a playlist entitled Intense Focus. On the one hand, this accessible listening environment is a great thing for classical music. It opens it up to an entirely new audience. But at the same time, it's so easy to get numb, to become desensitized to all of the music that's just floating around us, to lose the thrill of listening to music with our full attention. So how do you make a classical album that cuts through the noise, that demands real, active listening, one that brings the freshness back to listening to music in the digital age? Well, the pianist Víkingur Ólafsson might have the answer. These days, it feels like he is everywhere. He's been touring a duo program alongside Yujo Wang. He won his first Grammy for his recording of the Goldberg variations. He's done a Tiny Desk concert, and he's certainly thriving in the digital age. His recordings just surpassed 1 billion streams. He has the elegance of a pianist from a different age, but at the same time, his career has a sense of fun and spontaneity that feels distinctly now. He engages with music of all eras, unafraid of contemporary music and unafraid of adventurous experiments, and even a little bit of wry humor. He even did a rework of a piece by his Icelandic compatriot, the internet music superstar Laufey. Laufey. I hope I said it right.
Laufey.
And his ability to craft a cohesive and compelling artistic statement from a collection of pieces is easily one of the most exciting things happening in mainstream classical piano today. In the span of just a few years, he's gone from being just another Juilliard graduate cold calling a bunch of concert promoters and arts management agencies to being one of the most ubiquitous pianists currently working. And he's done it in a way that feels completely organic, as if he's been around for decades. But the thing is, he hasn't been around forever. And unlike many of my favorite pianists who I've been listening to for so long that I can barely remember, I can remember very distinctly the first time that I ever heard a recording of Víkingur Ólafsson. It was his provocatively titled 2018 album Johann Sebastian Bach. Provocative because this album contains not only original works by Bach, but also transcriptions of Bach's works that range from divine to irreverent. At the time, I was living in New York, and I had a 2.5-hour commute each way to go teach kids how to play the recorder on Long Island. That's a story for another time. But anyway, in order to pass time on the long commute, I would listen to entire albums from beginning to end. I got on the subway and I put the album on, listening to it through my pretty basic wired headphones. I wasn't expecting much, just some pleasant Bach to listen to while I tried to stay awake on the long commute. But I was immediately caught off guard. The sound of the city around me faded away as the opening notes of this album absolutely took my breath away. The counterpoint was crystal clear, the playing like diamonds, every voice perfectly etched into place. It was an exhilarating experience, a testament to the way that music can kind of change the entire course of your day. I was in complete bliss, so excited and so inspired to be a pianist, knowing that this is the kind of thing that you can do with your art. And ever since that day, it's an album that I've continuously come back to time and time again. But what makes this album so unique? Well, I think there are a few really concrete details that we can point to. And these are things which I think also help explain Víkingur Ólafsson's relevance in the current piano landscape. First of all, the sound of the album is so distinct. The way that the piano is recorded gives you a sense of listening to every single detail. It might seem kind of obvious, but recording is a very different art than live performance. You have the ability to capture every texture of the instrument, deep specificity and articulation, and sound colors which might not even be possible in a live concert. In Ólafsson's album, you can hear the air, the space, the way the piano resonates and breathes. It feels alive. Ólafsson has spoken about how he thinks of the hall and the space as a kind of collaborator in creating the sound of a recital. So it's clear he's thinking of recording in a similar way.
Let's say you play a note here, a note that, you press the hammer, it hits the string, the sound goes. Where does the sound go? It goes from the piano to the basically back wall of wherever you find yourself, and it comes back to you, and that's the feedback you get, and that's the acoustic, and that's basically the dialogue that you have with the hall. It changes your timings, it changes your tempos, it changes everything. The studio is where you tell people very confidential things, and you whisper your secrets to the microphone. The concert is something else. It can be very intimate and it can be very personal, but it's never entirely intimate. I think I want to make Glenn Gould turn in his grave with jealousy of the kind of live in the studio. I mean, imagine if sort of an ideological man like him would have actually had the luxury of the modern studio with all the creative possibilities that technology affords us.
This attention to sound serves the album well because it allows Ólafsson's crystal clear interpretations to really take center stage. In Bach's original works, he plays with deep clarity and precision. And then there's also moments of effortless virtuosity, like in Kempf's arrangement of Nun freut euch, liebe Christengemein. Then a track like Busoni's transcription of Nun komm der Heidenheiland emerges, with subtle pedaling that completely changes the dimensions of the sound world that we've been living in so far. We're suddenly reminded that we're listening to a modern-day grand piano played by a pianist who has been influenced by decades and decades of recordings of Bach's music. He writes in the album's liner notes that Bach's music is contemporary rather than classical. It has the potential to feel more or less new today as it did 300 years ago.
Bach's music is more modern than anything I played by any living composer. He seems to me always to be the future.
He also foregrounds the importance of the interpreter's voice in bringing Bach's music to life. He writes that at different points in his life, he was inspired by different pianists and different ways of approaching Bach's music. He cites the interpretations of Edwin Fischer, Rosalind Turek, Lipatti, Gould, and Argerich, among others. He says that each of these approaches has its own special beauty, and even if Bach were alive today, his interpretation wouldn't be the truth either. Great art always transcends the artist. This may well be the most provocative aspect of Ólafsson's conception of Bach, that through the passage of time, through interpretation and co-authorship, that perhaps the master's work could become something even greater than the sum of its parts. But beyond the beautiful sound of the recording or the crystal clear interpretations, there is one element that really takes this album to the next level. Something that fascinated me on the subway that day, and something that I still think about now. It's the way that Ólafsson curated this album. This is a masterclass in programming. I've always been fascinated in the artistic power of programming, and Ólafsson's Bach album is a great case study. A great recital or a great album is more than just a collection of pieces or checking the box to make sure that we have Baroque, classical, romantic, and a 5-minute contemporary piece. Instead, it's about the wider journey, about how the pieces speak to each other. When a pianist chooses what pieces to play on a recital or on an album, they're performing an act of compositional creativity. And there's a lot of things that need to be taken into account. How long the concert's going to be, how much time you have to prepare, what pieces you sound the best playing, what kind of ideas you want to communicate to the audience, what you want to say about each of these pieces, and of course, how each of the pieces individually sounds and how each piece sounds next to every other piece. It's a complex web of musical tetris that is nevertheless extremely fun to play, and one that if you master it, can actually create transcendent experiences for the audience. The best programs create dialogue between pieces, between eras, between listeners, audiences, and composers, revealing deep connections between all of these networks. I think one of the best ways to think about this is through the philosopher Julia Kristeva's concept of intertextuality, in which no text, or in this case, no musical work, exists in isolation. Instead, they're constantly in dialogue with pieces that have come before it. In the context of an album, each piece speaks to each other. changing the context based on what surrounds it. But at the same time, of course, a listener can just choose to listen to one track from the album, usually the one that is the most played on Spotify. Ólafsson takes advantage of this marvelously. His album isn't just Bach's greatest hits, as it certainly could have been, but instead it's a conversation between Bach and the composers that he inspired. Ólafsson wrote that, "In deciding what to record on this album, I found myself pondering the meaning of what is original and what is borrowed, copied, and sometimes augmented, reworked, transformed. Here too, each generation has something to say." Ólafsson uses this intertextuality to allow us to create our own new associations with Bach's legacy. And his playing does this too. At times, it's as precise as Gould, as restrained as Turek, or as emotionally and sonically expressive as Argerich. But it's ultimately through this clear and deep knowledge of the canon that Ólafsson is able to create something entirely original. There's a couple moments in his interpretation of the A major invention, a piece many of us are very familiar with from our childhood piano lessons, that demonstrate just how unique his interpretations can be, and how they're responding to a long history of playing Bach on the modern piano. And I haven't even mentioned the key relationship aspect in which each piece seamlessly resolves into the next. It's such a clear and clever way of organizing an album, but it's so technical and almost so simple compared to the profound conversations of time and interpreter that Ólafsson is also doing that I almost forgot to mention it, but it really creates an immersive experience when listening to this album. Just like the album's front cover, this is a kaleidoscopic view on what Bach means in the 21st century. By the way, there is tons of great content on Bach on Tonebase Premium, which is the platform that makes videos like this possible. I really love how many different kinds of perspectives there are on the premium platform as to how to learn Bach's music, how to play it, how to interpret it. There's really a kaleidoscope of possibilities there, and there's something really for everyone. So check the link in the description below to get started with a 14-day free trial. After my transcendent experience with the Bach album, I was excited to follow Ólafsson's career and to see that this wasn't just a one-off for him. Ólafsson is constantly experimenting with how pieces and composers speak to each other. His album Mozart and Contemporaries has a similar play on history as the Bach album. He places individual movements of Mozart alongside lesser-known composers from around the same time period. It exposes us to new pieces while also putting the familiar Mozart in a new light. Some of his recent albums lean more into the intricacies and subtleties offered by the process of recording an album. For example, on his album From Afar, he plays the same program twice, once on a concert grand and once on a squeaky upright in which we hear clearly the sound of the mechanisms. This sound world is kind of reminiscent to me of the way that these super popular minimalist pianists like Nils Frahm or Ludovico Einaudi record their instrument, this really intimate and close mic'd sound. And it's interesting that those guys are the undisputed kings of solo piano streaming at the moment. Of course, these experiments and explorations aren't always universally admired.
From afar, you cannot get far away enough.
And even for me, they're not always completely successful, but I'd much rather listen to an album that embraces intellectual risks than one that simply strings together famous pieces. All of this is what makes Ólafsson so meaningful in the era of streaming. He's really aware of contemporary trends, and he's able to maintain the preciousness of a single track and a single piece while also making it irresistible to listen to the whole album. He literally stops you in your tracks. But of course, Ólafsson isn't the only pianist thinking in these terms. For example, I love how Leif Ove Andsnes creates a whole new narrative around the often overlooked piano music of Sibelius, simply by choosing the perfect pieces and putting them together in a way that brings out the best in each of them. Alexei Lubimov's incredible album, The Messenger, did this at the turn of the millennium, before streaming was even a figment of our imaginations. he highlights 3 centuries of composers' lesser-known works to create a dialogue that spans the boundaries of time. In the liner notes of this album, we get a look at his programming philosophy, which I find incredibly inspiring and which kind of guided me as I also recorded and curated my own album recently. He writes, "What we have here is the story of a sort of journey, each stage of which is meant not so much to reveal the composer's soul, but as to bring us gradually closer to that essential source from which all these musical compositions draw their kinship and to which they owe their inner unity." I suspect Ólafsson would agree. With all that in mind, it's pretty fascinating that Ólafsson's most recent endeavor is the Goldberg variations. After all, this is Bach in his purest form, no transcriptions, no commentary from other performers. But at the same time, there is a resonance with what Ólafsson has done before. After all, the Goldberg variations are a kind of collection of textures and ideas which, in totality, reveal all of the possibilities of Bach's keyboard writing.
In the process of preparing to record the Goldberg variations, I actually had some fun by reorganizing the variations, looking for a different kind of a set list to see if I could match Bach's, find something new. I found something new, but I could not match Bach's. And from doing that, kind of realized the unbelievable narrative genius that this piece represents, and how each variation is exactly in its right place.
In an interview with Gramophone, Ólafsson reflects on his success in the internet age and what it means for Bach's music. To think that the Goldberg variations were written for essentially nobody and published with no great hope of any real circulation in his time. And then you see the work having something like close to 100 million streams in 1 year from my album alone, plus all the other Goldberg variation albums, and you get a number that Bach would not have believed. I wish he had been able to see it. I think it's a golden age for classical music, but we're just not noticing it. In an era where music is more accessible than ever, Ólafsson proves that a classical album can still be an experience, and that there's still transcendent power and purpose in playing the music of these composers from centuries ago. This isn't just a collection of pieces, but a carefully, lovingly, and colorfully crafted world, one that rewards any listener who's willing to sit down and take it in. Or in my case, was simply blindsided by its brilliance on a random Tuesday. And maybe that's the real takeaway from all of this, that a great artist doesn't just play the music, but shapes the very way that we hear it. Thanks so much for joining us today. It's so much fun to talk about some of my favorite albums and favorite recordings with all of you. And I love hearing from all of you. It's been so nice to read all your comments. So please sound off down below. What's your favorite example of great programming? What's your favorite Ólafsson recording? Have you seen him live? I haven't yet, and I'm really looking forward to getting the opportunity to do so sometime soon, I hope. Be sure to leave us a comment, and if you haven't yet, like the video and subscribe to the channel and share it with someone who you think might be interested. Also, if you're interested in expanding your own piano journey, check out Tonebase Premium, the platform that makes videos like this possible. There are hours and hours of content, and there's something for someone of every level. In fact, there's a new 101 fundamentals course on the platform that just dropped this month. Check the link in the description below for more info and to sign up for a 14-day free trial. I'm Robert Fleitz from Tonebase, and I'll see you next time. That perhaps through reinvention and reimagination, reinterpretation and rejuvenation, how many more words can I use? Recycling and remixing and